Welcome to the KCA Community Association General Membership Meeting on the 19th of the month. My name is Mike Moran. I'm currently the president of KCA, and welcome everybody to this meeting. First, I'm going to ask for a moment of silence for all our Ohio that we lost on this island. So please give us a moment of silence. Mahalo. Okay, now I'm going to turn it around completely. I would ask you to please voice, and if you want to stand up and give a standing ovation for our Maui firefighters. Thank you, folks. Well deserved. Okay, our process tonight, if you have questions, when you checked in, we have index cards, and if you didn't get one, we can get you one. But you can write down your questions on the card, and the questions will be at the end of the presentation. So you can listen, and maybe a question will be answered by one of our presenters. Okay, just from a show of hands, can I ask how many people here live south of the highway? Thank you. Just to get an indication of much consideration on the most dangerous part of our community, and it's usually up here. Okay, we have kind of a mix of the old and the new this evening. Somewhat old, is our KCA Community Association, which was officially established in 1960. So it's been around for a while. Not as long as I have been around, but it's been around for quite some time. What's new? This beautiful new facility for our first meeting here. We're very pleased and proud to have our first of many meetings here. And as part of our introductions, we'll have Lynn from ProArts come up and say a few words in a little bit. Okay, a semi-old thing where those of you who have been coming to these meetings for years know that we've had a continuous Maui Food Bank drive. So we continue with that. And as we all know, there's a greater need than ever right now for donations, so we hope you brought a donation tonight and put it outside. If you did not, there's many ways to do it. You can give them a check, you can drop off a donation at several places. There's a barrel right down at one of the storefronts here. So please support the Maui Food Bank, which is helping feed under normal circumstances, not current. Normally, it's estimated 10% of our keiki and kapuna on this island go to bed hungry on occasion, which seems like a tragedy. So let's give them some nutritious food, please.
No, that I saw is
Okay, new, we're going to break from all the usually hear me for the whole doggone meeting. Tonight, we're going to involve some of our other board members. We have some skilled board members that don't get to participate tonight. We're going to change that. And is Andrew Bureau here?
He's right here.
Okay, Andrew is going to come up and say a few words about what is happening in our community in his specialty. Come on, Andrew.
Thank you. I'm the chair of the Education and Recreation Committee.
And on behalf of the KCA Community Association, I just want to say how proud we are to welcome the students, staff, and families of Lahaina and the West Side during this difficult time. We understand there are approximately 500 plus Lahaina Luna students at Kulani Hikoi High School, and that is probably the highest, best use I could have ever imagined for that school. So, and kudos to their staffs for their collaboration and working together and the camaraderie of the students. It's absolutely touching. We also have over 100 plus Westside students at Lokilani Intermediate School and over 130 at Kamali'i Elementary School. And there are some also at KCA Elementary. So it's just with a heavy heart that we welcome them with open arms and open hearts. Big mahalo. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Okay, we want to recognize some officials, and I'm not used to the professional spotlight, so I'm trying to pick out. We certainly know that we have our state senator, Angus McKelvey, here this evening. And we have our South Maui Council member, Tom Cook, here this evening. And I believe I saw Council member Gabe Johnson. And we have our fire chief. Okay, am I missing anybody? Okay, not bad for an amateur first night in the spotlight. Okay, now we're going to bring up Lynn McPew, who is our host for at the Pro Arts. Lynn, you want to come up and give us a little.
Hello everyone, my name's Lynn. I'm Executive Director here at Pro Arts. I just wanted to say how happy we are to welcome the KCA Community Association. For the 5 of you that I don't know from coming here to shows, welcome very much. If this is your first time, we really believe in supporting the community here. Having organizations like this here is what we are all about. I hope to see much more of you. Right now we shut down and operated as a donation center for a time, a couple weeks out of after the fires, but we are starting to return to programming because we are finding that we want to keep the artists working. The artists were very hard hit during the time of COVID, and we want to keep these folks, these incredibly talented, brilliant people, working here on island. So thank you so much to all those who support the arts. We hope that you will get out and support the arts all across the island. There are amazing things still happening, and we are trying to feature Lahaina artists as much as possible, get folks down here, and also help to coordinate entertainment out there. We hope that the arts can continue to be a healing presence on the islands, and I just want to say thank you so much again for all of you being here today and for sharing, and we are delighted to be hosts for you this evening. If you have any questions, I am up at the front. I always talk this fast, but I will try to curb it a bit. And we do have information, of course, about the venue and about particularly things like our Hawaiian Arts and Culture series. We try and provide as much free programming as possible. And if you do know anyone who has been impacted by the fires, we are right now, for the foreseeable future, offering free tickets to anyone impacted. We just want to make sure that the arts stay accessible, and honestly, we want to make sure that anybody who really just needs a night off and a night of healing art to be able to do so. So please share that with anyone who you feel would benefit from it. Thank you so very much for being here.
Okay, one more. We have to make this official announcement. Those of you who have been coming to these meetings know every September, by our bylaws, we have to announce that we have a nominating committee. A nominating committee is established to select the board for the following year. So this will be, the nominating committee is looking for candidates for the 2024 board. Our terms are 1 year, so nobody is automatically comes back. The nominating committee interviews and gives the nominations to the KCA membership at the next meeting, the November meeting. So we have to announce who is on this committee. And the committee chair is Patricia Stillwell. Yay! She's done this for years, and amongst all her many other duties. And her committee members are Randy Wagner, Ron Schmidt, Bob Schauberg, and myself, Mike Moran. So we actually, technically, we have to get the membership to vote to approve. So if you are a member, can we please just ask you to raise your hand and we'll say approved by acclamation.
Approved by
Thank you very much. That was off the hook, you don't have to participate. Okay, enough for me. If you're interested in the board, tomorrow is the opening day. Check with Patricia up front about how you would apply for the 2024 board. Now I'm going to introduce board member Bob, who's going to take over. I get to sit down and kick back. He's going to run the rest of the meeting. Bob, welcome.
Okay. I'm going to quickly introduce the panel, starting from right to left. Elizabeth Pickett. She's a rock star. She's the co-executive director of the Hawaii Wildfire Management Organization since 2008. Right? Next we have Chief Henry Lindell Jr. He is the Assistant Chief of Operations for the Department of Fire and Public Safety. And finally, well, not finally, because Angus is coming up too. So. But at the table, we've got Michael Williams. He's the president of Maui Tomorrow Foundation, and he's a board member of Stand Up Maui. And without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Elizabeth. She's got a lot of good stuff to say.
Hey, good evening, everyone. I want to start out just by saying thank you to KCA for asking us to come and talk about fire, and really offering this opportunity for all of us to get on the same page with the same foundation and understanding of wildfire and all the things that we can do about it. And I'm hoping that this is just step one of what will be a long relationship together, working on fire preparedness and mitigation together. So thank you for having me, and thank you to the hosts who organized all of this. I have 30 slides and 25 minutes, I'm told, so I'm going to go really fast, but I think it's worth it for us to go through the series of slides I put together so that we can really learn and build our way into our next steps. So with that, I'll just say I have been a part of Hawaii Wildfire Management Organization since 2008, and we are a nonprofit, and we were founded by fire chiefs and forestry folks and ranchers and farmers and conservationists and community members who came together in the year 2000 because they were noticing that fires were getting bigger, there were more of them, and there wasn't a lot of programming or support or technical assistance to get better prepared and to take action. And so our approach this entire time has been to be collaborative, to learn first together and then decide together what actions should be taken, and then to continue to work on things together collaboratively across boundaries, across sectors, communities and natural resources, being protected in an integrated way, not siloed, etc. And that approach has really been effective. So with that, I'm just going to dive in because a huge part of what we have done is that learning first, and so I want to bring you into that so that you're all caught up with what we've learned over all these years. So if you go to the next slide, I want to talk about what is going on with, anywhere. Whether you see lots of fires or not so many fires, it has to do with what's going on in these three areas. So what's going on with climate, ignitions, and vegetation come together to create the recipe for what kind of fire issues you have. Next slide. And in Hawaii, we are increasing in all the areas. So we're having increased rain events, pulse rain events that grow up our vegetation, and then we're having increased episodes of drought. We have an expansion of grasslands, and we haven't caught up in terms of how well we're managing that grass and those fuels. And then we have lots of human-caused ignition. So 99% of fires in Hawaii are started by people. 3/4 of those are on accident. And so for us, that's very hopeful because we can prevent at least that many ignitions if we all catch up to the really, to the risk that we're facing in terms of, fire danger. Next slide. So when we're talking to folks, we've realized simplifying the problem is really helpful because actually with wildfire it's multifaceted. There are lots of complexities and contributing factors. There's no one solution. There's no silver bullet. There's no one party or one entity responsible. It's actually a whole story with lots of pieces that need to be addressed. So in its simplest form, when we talk about fire, we acknowledge that Hawaii and the Pacific are seeing an increase in wildfire. We can go to the next slide. We know it's because of people. The top causes are barbecues, campfires, equipment, everything from welders and grinders to sparking, lawn care equipment to infrastructural equipment, vehicles, driving on dry grass, etc., and fireworks. And then when there is a spark and it ignites, we can go to the next slide. When it ignites unmanaged lands where there's lots of fuel, the fire carries, and then next slide. And we are now faced with urban conflagrations and structure-to-structure ignitions that also endanger community lives and safety as we've seen. And so in each of these areas, there is work to be done. Next slide. We've done a lot of work to understand trends and patterns of fire, where fires are occurring, how many, how big are they. This is our most recent map, and even the way that we are able to secure the fire records isn't consistent. So you'll notice the red dots indicate ignition points that required a firefighting response. And then the bigger areas are the biggest fires we've had that actually had a helicopter fly over, but not all fires get that. But you can see that fires are being started by people requiring a firefighting response on all sides of every island. And in some cases, it's almost like if you took the roads off the map, you could still see the roads because they've had so many ignitions in those places. We also know, I think I have some more slides about this, but when we have been gathering the records, we have learned a lot of things. We know that Hawaii has become one of the most fire-prone states in the US. And I don't know that our awareness until recently has all the way caught up to that truth. Next slide. So here's what it looks like if you're into data and graphs and charts. On the left, you can see, this was for about, 6 or 7 year period on the very left side. We were trying to see what does our fire issue look like relative to other US states. And when we look at how much percentage of our state is burning every year, of course our acre numbers are lower, we're a tiny state, but percentage of our state that's burning every year, you can see we're right up there with the westernmost fire-prone states. And those lines on the dots, if you're not totally into graphs and charts, it just represents the annual variability. So from year to year it varies, but the average is right up in there or slightly above how much of other states are burning. Now of course, our acres are lower, so that doesn't ring true for numbers of acres, but it still leaves us with impacts that are broad and long-lasting and important to address. And you can just see, what our fire occurrences look like, how many acres have burned over the years, and we are all catching up to the fact that we're having more fires, they're getting bigger, they're getting more impacting, etc. And we know that it's largely a result of land use changes and increases in populations and accidental fire starts. Next slide. So I said it before about our accidental fire starts. I want to emphasize that. And then we've talked about non-native fire-prone grasses. I do want to dispel one myth that's coming about where people are really afraid of grass now. And so in case that's you, I just want to let you know that grass isn't going to just explode and turn on fire or catch on fire. It takes an ignition, and that can be prevented. You can manage. When we talk about all of this grass, it's talking about the unmanaged grasses and lands, not so much just any old grass. And so we're starting to have to dispel some myths and talk about the nuances of that. So you don't just have to be really afraid of every little bit of grass you see. There's more to it, and we can talk about that for time. And then drought increases risk, of course. And what you can expect from the National Weather Service over the next year is that it looks like we're going to have an extended dry season into a dry winter into our next dry season. So we're looking at a year of really dry conditions. Next slide. And then finally, I just want to make sure everybody knows that a lot of work has been done to understand our risk. And a lot of work has been done to write fire plans that people are now aware exist. And we're in the process with Division of Forestry and Wildlife and Maui Fire Department to update a bunch of the old plans, and South Maui is one of them. So we're going to put in for a proposal to get the funding to update the South Maui Community Wildfire Protection Plan. So I hope you'll all show up when we have the community meetings for that. And then I wanted to show you, now this only went through 2016 and we're updating it now. So Central Maui has had a lot of land use changes, but we've done a lot of work to understand where our fire kills are. Next slide. We also know where the fires have been occurring. Again, we're updating this so it's older information, but I just wanted you to know there's a lot to work from in terms of understanding where we can get the most bang for the buck in terms of mitigation measures. Next slide. And then finally, we know, we've run the analyses to understand where, even though we see ignitions all over the map, where are they happening the most? And so you'll notice, you're in an area where there's a lot of ignitions, preventable human error and accidental ignitions. So that's something that we could really use help sharing with people. When it's hot and windy and really dry, it's probably not the time to use your welder and spark all over next to dry grass without any way to mitigate, right? We have to be careful with all the things that might ignite. And so that's something that's within our power immediately, to be more careful and to talk with each other about reducing that piece of the equation. Next slide. And then finally, we know where fuels need to be managed. We've met with as many large landowners as who would meet with us. We sat with them, we mapped out where fuels are being managed. I say fuels, I mean vegetation. Where is vegetation being managed? Where are the gaps? In an ideal world, what would you get done for fire protection? We workshopped it all across the state and said, well, we don't know how much funding we're going to get, but where should we start first if we do get funding? And so that has been really established. We know where our priorities are, and we are actually many of our partners, watershed partnerships, fire department, forestry and wildlife, Hawaii Wildfire Management, lots of us are working together, and we have been a long time. So even if it seems like lots of people are learning now that fire is the thing and we need to take action, you can rest assured that there have been some of us working really hard on this, and we welcome you into that community so that we can do more together. Next slide. And then, so finally, this is where I get into all the things we can do. But the first part is to recognize that we can make a lot more progress when we're all doing it together, when we acknowledge that there's a role for all of us to play. And there really is. And we have information and materials and support and programming and technical assistance for every role we could think of in terms of every sector, every person. And it's just been, it's been a challenge getting people to come and use that and be at the table and prioritize wildfire. And in the last 5 weeks, our world has just radically changed, where now everybody wants to be a part of it. And we're stoked and we're tired. but here we go. So we welcome you into that. I'm so glad so many people are here tonight that are even interested in this. Next slide. And that said, I say that because I really, really want to underscore, and I'm glad I have support from our fire department partners here, that firefighting is the very last line of defense. So any expectation of doesn't the fire department do that? I always joke that there's no way that there's enough personnel to have a firefighter with you every time you have a barbecue, every time you have a campfire, every time you drive your car, making sure you're not starting fires and all that. There's actually roles we all need to play in preventing fires from being ignited, in managing our homes and yards, in advocating for legislation maybe, for policy, for budgets, for working side by side, communities and large landowners to manage risk. There's so much we all need to be doing. So we just are so glad that you're here tonight. And then, if we can't prevent everything, we want to minimize how many fires are happening, how far they can spread, optimize all the resources on the ground so when the firefighters do show up, they have everything they need and not so hard of a problem to solve at the last minute when every safeguard has been missed. Next slide. So we work a lot with the Fire Adapted Communities Network, which is a national entity that does lots of preparedness and community wildfire mitigation projects. And they've created this graphic to underscore the fact that there really are roles for everyone to play. And Hawaii Wildfire Management Organization has made this giant wheel. I didn't share it, but we think there's even more than this. You know, we think about teachers, the media, engineers, architects, land use planners, our elected officials and community leaders. There's really a lot for all of us to be doing, and our fire outcomes depend on that whole system having wildfire safety in mind. Next slide. And then this is one last way to think about things. And this is coming, again, from our partners all across the U.S. who've been thinking about fire and dealing with it a very long time. It is so multifaceted. And so just trying to figure out, well, where do we even start if it is so complex and there is so much going on? Where do we start and what can we do? And this is just a really good framework. So our goals are really that our communities and our built environment and our human behaviors and policies are all caught up and adapted to the risk that we face. And so that's the Fire Adapted Communities piece. We want to be able to be as prepared as possible to prevent fire, receive fire, survive fire, and recover from fire. We want all of that in place to optimize our safety and readiness. And then we want to work to make sure our landscapes are resilient. Any active use of land, whether it's grazing, farming, parks, bike paths, it doesn't matter what it is, but any active use of land, active management of land already starts to reduce the risk. It's just when it sits there unmanaged that we start to have the risk that we see on the ground. And then finally, that's the firefighting piece. We want to have safe and effective fire response, and we want our firefighters to be safe. We want them to have everything they need, and we want to advocate for that and help them do that instead of just expect them to solve the whole thing with not enough funding and not enough support, etc. So all of those things have to come together, and everyone needs the best available information from which to work so that we're all informed, making good decisions as we work in each of these realms. So the rest of my presentation is all focused on the community portion, but there's more where this comes from, and we can keep talking because there's a lot of work been done in every realm. Next slide. So in terms of being prepared, I saw that KCA posted the Ready, Set, Go. I'm going to dive into a few things and components of that program, but I just want you to know the most general, basic preparedness materials that you can get started with are these two resources. So first is Ready, Set, Go. It is comprehensive, it's like 20 pages, but it goes through the entire timeline of being ready with your home, yard, and family, all the way through evacuation. And there's stuff in there for part-time residents and for large landowners as well. And then the Wildfire and Drought Lookout is a campaign that all of our agencies across the state endorse and push out every dry season. So when you see this come through, if you're on social media or it comes through a newsletter, or our elected officials, we send it every year so that they can spread it too. You can spread it through your community communications. We don't have any money for it, but it's been working since 2016. Just getting it out there, getting the messages. Tip number 38, we can put that material out there so it's in everybody's consciousness all the time during dry season. So we've developed this program across the state for everybody to try to make use of, like it, share it, all the things, so that it really shows up in everybody's awareness as much as possible. Next slide. So I want to talk about Ready, Set, Go in case you haven't had time to dive into it. We have lots of webinars and workshops, and we can come back and do a whole Ready, Set, Go workshop if you want. But I just highlighted what Ready, Set, and Go mean for this presentation. So next slide. The Ready portion has to do with managing your yard, good housekeeping, mow your grass, trim up your trees, sweep your leaf piles, clean up everywhere. The way we like to think about it is remembering that fire doesn't just spread through direct flame contact. Embers are thrown in the wind, and wherever they land, you want them to just burn out. You don't want them to land in a little pile of leaves or kindling or something that can then ignite. And so just good housekeeping is really what that requires. There's a lot of technique to it, 0 to 5 feet around your house. Combustible free zone is optimal, and you can start working out across your yard. But if you're going to start somewhere, start in that 0 to 5 foot zone. But ideally do it all And then the next part is hardening your home. You want to think through anytime you do a remodel or you have a chance to replace combustible building materials with non-combustible. Each thing you do adds up to greater and greater protection. And then finally, we really recommend ahead of time, you make an emergency evacuation plan with your family, and there's stuff you can do inside the book to help you do that, but practice it. And think about your pets. Think about neighbors who may be mobility challenged, include them in your planning. So just really think that through and practice it, and make sure everybody is in the loop and understanding what your plan is way ahead of time. When it's raining and you're not even thinking fire, we want that to all be happening all year long and fresh and in your mind all the time. Next slide. SET is about maintaining situational awareness. And what we mean by that is kind of on two scales. So as we're getting out of a wet season and into a drier season, notice when the seasons are changing. Notice when the grass is going from green to yellow to brown to gray to brittle. As it's turning colors, you should be like, is my yard ready? Is my family ready? Have I done everything I can? Is my house ignition resistant? Is my yard ignition resistant? Is my family ready? And do those actions ahead of time to make sure they are. So you can be paying attention all the time. And then during a fire event, make sure you're paying attention. Know where it is, be tracking it, sign up for your notifications, official ones, follow official information so you have the right information. But pay attention because things change really fast, as we've seen. Winds change fast, it's unpredictable. The more you're paying attention and thinking ahead and using your own eyes and your nose and you're looking around and your own spidey sense for things, be paying attention to all of that. And then that leads us to go. So next slide, which is leave early. The Ready, Set, Go evacuation model is just leave early. Don't get caught up in traffic. Don't wait to be personally escorted out of your house. We don't have personnel for that. It's really hard to see, it's smoky. We know that's not always the perfect remedy, but in a lot of mega fires across the world, areas like Australia, the Ready, Set, Go program for the United States and the Hawaii version of it all came from lessons hard learned from giant fires in Australia, where they realized, if your house is ready and you have defensible space and everybody's prepared and you feel like you've done what you need to do, there's no reason not to just go to dinner or go to the beach or go to the mall or go somewhere out of Dodge, because you can always go back home. But that's a really good practice to have in mind, like, we're not so sure. You don't have to just sit there and wait and be scared. You can just leave because you did all your work all year long and the good housekeeping is in place. So it's not perfect because, as we've seen, some things just move so fast. But up to a certain scale of fire behavior, this works really well. So it's worth having as part of your toolkit. Next slide. So the Wildfire and Drought Lookout fact sheet is kind of a quick and dirty version of everything I shared. It's basically like, don't start fires. Harden your home, lighten your landscape, plan ahead, work with your neighbors or community association to get better prepared for a wildfire. So those are the tips and messages that go out. And so feel free to use this as a resource as well. Next slide. Keep in mind, if you have any events or things you're doing with children, we have lots of materials that we're happy to share. We have they're free, but sold out of Ready, Set, Goes. And every county is waiting for a bigger, more shipment of it, but we still have tons of kinky materials. So if you want those, let us know and we can send them your way. So we have activity books, coloring sheets, placemats, posters, and if you want them, Kaleo, the Pueo, is the wildfire mascot that we have, and he can show up at your events. Next slide. And then finally, if you really want to dig deep and you liked all that data and all those charts and you want to know about mitigation best practices and you want to know about all the fire science that we have developed over the years, all the recommended actions, and you're really into it, our Pacific Fire Exchange project, we co-lead with University of Hawaii. and you can go to pacificfireexchange.org, and that's where we put all the deeper information. So just know that that's available if it's of interest. Next slide. And then finally, and I think this is almost my last slide, this is what I really want to talk with you about. The Firewise Community Program is a neighborhood level risk reduction program. There's a Firewise program sponsored by the National Fire Protection Association at the national level, and they allow each state to participate. We partner with Division of Forestry and Wildlife and Maui Fire Department to do a risk reduction program that leads to Firewise. And it's a really cool program in that it gives you structure to organize your fire preparedness and mitigation actions around. So the first part of it is a hazard assessment. And all the fire experts come out, we walk around with a handful of people who are interested in carrying Firewise forward. We call it a Firewise committee for your neighborhood or your community. And we like to say we give you the fire lenses, so you start to look around and understand what we're looking at and what we're talking about. And then we develop a report that takes pictures and highlights certain hazard areas and puts together a bunch of recommendations, and we hand that off to the committee, Firewise committee. And sometimes it's not the community association board, and sometimes it is, and sometimes it's a committee of the board. You self-design all of that. You self-define your boundaries for what your community or neighborhood is. And then once you have all of those recommendations and you have enough people, then you start working on developing an action plan. And we connect you with all the other communities across the state quarterly for trainings, for motivation, for sharing lessons learned. And I was just talking with our fire department about how a month and a half ago, we had 19 communities in the program. And we've had over 20 more start the process in the last couple of weeks. So we're excited about that. So we hope that you'll be one of them, because it's a really good organizing tool. And then you're not alone in it too, because a lot of times when there are sticking points, some other communities who've been doing it much longer have figured out some workarounds, have good advice, or just encouragement. And it's really cool to have the localized neighborhood, community level work going on, and also to plug into the bigger statewide network. And then annually we get together and it's pretty fun. So we invite you to join this program, and to get started you can just contact us and we'll figure out next steps from there. So with that, next slide. The last thing we're doing, because there is so much interest and so much excitement and fear and a lot of ideas bouncing all around, we want to capture those so that we can start to make sense of those and collect them for you while your creative juices are flowing. People start to simmer down about fire with a timeline after an event, but we want to have this be ongoing. We want to work on it with you for the long term. That's what it really takes. It's a long game, so we want to capture all the enthusiasm now, but carry it forward into the future. So I don't know if you can scan that from your phone, but you can also look on our website. We developed a survey using the cohesive strategy with, if you remember that Venn diagram, as the model. So we asked you, what are your concerns and your recommended actions for adapting your community to the risk that you face? What are your ideas for resilient landscapes and fuels management? What are your ideas and your concerns? And recommended actions for optimizing firefighting response, and what are your information and technology needs related to improving your fire preparedness? And so we address each of those categories. So when you get to it, it might look kind of long, but we're collecting all your ideas. So if you want to participate, we welcome you to do that. And if you join Firewise, you're going to have a really more in-depth opportunity to do that as well. So with that, thank you. That's it.
And by the way, we're going to hear a lot more about the Firewise communities as the evening goes on. Next, we're going to hear from Senator McKelvey.
Wow, this is an interesting setup, isn't it? A little shocking to the system here. I'll see what I can do. Well, first I want to thank Elizabeth for her presentation, and I, for one, am looking forward to working with her and her organization very closely on even more ideas. And some of the things that she's touched upon are some of the things that we are hoping to do in the legislature this session. Many of you know I'm personally affected by the fires, along with the Brotherhood of the Band, as we joke, for all of us who are staying in visitor accommodations right now, uncertain of what's going to happen and how it's going to happen. And I'm a lucky one. You know, I'm pretty much a self-individual, but there are a lot of families, kids, pets in Kapuna who are completely in the lurch right now. So who aren't getting the aid they need, and this world is filled with uncertainty. So that's why, to me, I'm just so passionate about not only them and us and the community, but also in trying to, what we've suffered, to basically, if there's lessons learned and things we can do with the legislature to prepare South Maui so you do not have to walk these footsteps that we've had to walk, then that makes it well worth it. You know, right now, I'm flying in the other day from Honolulu. You fly over to Elizabeth Point's brittle fields, Ma'alaya, looking really brittle. And, you know, we are the harbinger of doom if we visit this community too. So what's been done, what we can do is important in preparing the lessons and things that we saw, not only during the fire, but in the response efforts, we can use to better prepare the South Maui community. So with that, these are just some of the ideas. So next slide, please, right here. I equate what happened more than a hurricane, Katrina, to 9/11. I think some of the feds see it the same way. What you had was, minus the radiation, an explosion that occurred at ground zero, where I was told by some 3,000 degrees, some of the fires melting glass and everything, a blast zone, vaporizing. Imagine everything being vaporized in your life. You know, 5 by 8 miles, completely reduced to nothing in a flash, pun intended. But the damage isn't just located to there. The second ring is the damage to the economy and homes and stuff in the area, that their homes are standing, but their businesses are gone, their medical facilities are gone, their daycare is gone, their social structure is gone. They're impacted. Plus, you still only have that one great highway in and out. Let's not forget that, shall we? So you seem to forget that in DC and Honolulu. And then finally, the green ring, which is, these are the communities that are going to feel the effect of this thing. And like radiation, it's not a poison that you can see or feel, but it's going to affect all of you as homeowners, as business owners, as community members. Higher insurance rates, loss of insurance carriers. You've lost customers, you've lost businesses, visitor economy. Even though this side of the island is intact, the rest of the world doesn't seem to think so. And you have mortgages due, rents. All of this contamination is visiting the South Maui community from what's happening. Even though the damage of ground zero is over there, these are the effects that we're seeing that we need to tackle now and in the next legislative session. So that's the way I try to think about this thing. And I try to differentiate between ground zero victims, as we nickname them, and those who are outside who still need help. But those who are outside have infrastructure, those who are inside have nothing. And that's there's eliminating right there. So next slide, if you will. These are some of the legislative solutions that we are trying to brainstorm, looking at other states, as well as past bills. These are measures we've introduced in the past. Some of them are mine. I have introduced measures in the past to mandate undergrounding of utilities. While we have a lot of sources that were listed before, one source that doesn't seem to be listed is power lines going down in high wind events. Hurricane Lane, we saw it. The PSP report, I won't get into the details about that for another time. However, legislation on underground utilities is to mandate this in high-risk areas where there's been a history, a tradition, and a risk. They need to be underground. So that's, we did it before, and it didn't pass, so now we're going to do it again. And also to require the PUC to really be aggressive on the power supply plans for downing the grid during these high wind events and ensuring that there is transparency insofar as any investigations and such, a regulatory. The Community Fuel Reduction Project, a bill that was introduced last year that unfortunately did not make it past the money committees. I'm determined to revisit that, to try to aggressively fund because of the work that, that's been touched upon. That's a huge component of this program. And addressing, working with private landowners, county, DOFA, and all these entities, because fuel source doesn't know boundaries. Oh, it's a county property, I think it won't grow there. No, it will. And So that's the way we need to look at it. So that's, and finally also the Legislative Utility Review Task Force to again be very aggressive about utility review. There's more measures that we can bring back, but what was shocking, and I guess shame on me, in the past, we actually had a wildfire package every year. We actually worked with the State Fire Council, we worked with KCA and others to do a wildfire caucus, and it faded over time. And so the fact you look back and you're like, there's a very few legislation being introduced is shame on us for that. And that won't happen again because of the lessons learned and the fact that this could potentially visit every community. So that's why we're aggressively looking for ideas and working with our new partners and others. Next slide, please. Sorry, a little long with that. This is a big one that's going to happen. Speaking of contamination and fallout, is going to be insurance. Coverage, amounts of coverage, all of this could happen. In Massachusetts, they had formed a state captive to self-insure state assets. And after the Florida condo collapse, nobody would underwrite for structural insurance in that area. And so the captive stepped in to provide that insurance. We were in the process of setting up a state captive through a study done by the Department of Accounting and General Services to self-insure our state assets. And now because of this fire, we feel that it's very pertinent to have this conversation now because of the inability perhaps of people to get insurers or the insurer of last resort, which exists now because of the lava. HPIA can get reinsurance to provide good rates to people when you have opportunities. But this is one of the things we're doing to look at. Next slide, please. Sorry. To touch upon what was said earlier, look at fire lanes, land maintenance, and fallow fields. You know, right now the DOT is doing some ad hoc work on trying to cut the grass back and water it, but it's clearly not enough. We need to dedicate serious funding on that. We got to build, and I'm so glad that the council member here is here because we worked this last session on R1 to expand the R1 program, and this is an area where funding for this infrastructure along the Pipilani Highway for one could prove critical. And as well as working with the DLNR to look at the ideas in the past of cooperative clearing of streamways and other large areas of land and controlled burns as deemed necessary. Anyway, next. Rehabilitation of watersheds is a critical part. It serves two goals. Rehabilitate watersheds, protect against flood events, and it also protects as natural fire breaks. Reopening the area, regreening it. We've noticed already, you'll see in the next slide, the native species come back naturally, as well as fencing to control access deer, our good friend there, that often is creating the situation. Next slide, please. This is what I was talking about earlier. We're going to be working with this organization that's already doing wetland restoration. Look at this fire break that now exists. They redid the channel. The water now flows through. You have the boundary between the ocean and the fresh water occurring, and now the wetlands on this side are re-flooding, and this is a crazy native species that have been gone for 100 years are sprouting up all over the place. You got a fire break, you got wetland restoration, you have flood control. It's 3 wins, right? So this is the kind of things that we really want to help support, and the group is already out there working. And the county has been working, and thank you, Kelly, for your support for them as well. But these are the kind of things that we can use to try to tackle it. Next slide, please. And then finally, again, as we discussed earlier, R1 reservoirs. We've got to double down on the last year's funding bill that we did. It's a grant program. We need to make it actual funding program. We need to draw down federal funds, which working with your state representative, Amato, she and her team are doing that. And also, these are essential for firefighting, as well as irrigation for wetlands, and of course, potentially for R1 water state highways. Next slide. And then finally, we did this for the ambulances several years ago. We secured state fundings to get these latest ambulances that are like mobile hospitals. We want to try to do the same thing for our firefighters. We want to try to get them equipment that is, I believe, needed. We're no longer a rural county anymore. We had an urban firestorm, so to be able to try to perhaps to get them these striker trucks that you see right here, to be able to lay high volumes of water and foam down. I can imagine if we could put foam on the roofs below the fire with a couple of those things and water, what we might have been able to save. So our men and women fighting deserve to have the best modern equipment possible. And this is why we did it for the ambulance service. It is a county function, but we want to support the state, and so we're going to put that bill in for sure. Next section. And then finally, also the state fire council. There's a state fire council. They get together and they promulgate rules, advise, code. With the rebuilding of Lahaina, particularly, and some of these proclamations that have been issued to generate quick housing, we need to be concerned about code compliance and fire safety. You don't want to rebuild what was burned and create a potential fuel source for faulty wire and self-wire. Like the ad you hear on the radio, right? Oh, right, we'll put in the PV. You know, exactly, except this time your whole neighborhood burns now. And so really, the state fire council, they need support, staff support. They've also needed help on the code front. And those are the things that working in the Consumer Protection Commerce Committee that we plan to address next year. So, any more that we've done? Oh, mobile link communications, we lost it right away. We struggled. We had community groups that were set up during lane that couldn't reactivate and couldn't communicate. Supplies weren't getting in, people were running around. It was chaos. Absolute chaos. And so what little cell signal existed at Kapolua Airport became a lifeline. But the fact is we need mobile link assets pre-deployed in the different areas like South Maui so that when, if something happens, you lose communications, you have the ability to immediately roll out CALs or some kind of infill. There's one device being looked at. I have some concerns, an edge repeater device, because it still needs Starlinks. That's why we have a procurement code. So I'm hoping as these technologies are reviewed that we will use a procurement code to make sure we get things that can be readily purchased, effectively deployed, and can help to restore community communications, as well as being redundancy for first responder communications that may be lost. So next one. And then finally, as Liz talked about before, the big self-reliance. Here's a sad, brutal reality. We saw it in Katrina, we saw it in 9/11, saw it in Sandy. You see it all the place when everything fails, communications fail, government is nowhere. They won't be riding on a white knight to save you. You, the community, are going to have to rally and save yourselves. And self-organize and self-communicate. And this is why the KCA is an important organization to be involved in this. But really, at the end of the day, your communications with your neighbors and friends, and we found the hard way, our reliance on text and self-communications with the change failed. So it's important that, you know, alternate forms of communications and connections be maintained and created. So, and you have a bug out bag. One thing I'll advocate for right now, I was with my brother's fiance, and I saw all the smoke went from white to black, and I'm like, this isn't looking good. So I created, real quickly on the fly, did a bug out bag. Little bag you throw in. If I'm gone 2 to 3 days, I can live off this bag. Threw it in there, and LaShawn's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "It's a bug out bag." It's like, "What?" I go, "Get this, and this, you know, and a can of dog food for Canada." And go ahead and you throw it in your car. Even though the smoke's way, throw it in your car. And then we got to dig out. We leaked, and what happened. You know, we have a bug out bag, and as a result, I got my dog, Gambit, their dog, and I got to share an avocado and a tortilla. And smoke of the Safeway parking lot, sucking up fumes. Anyway, next slide, sorry. Lessons learned in the crisis, real quickly. These are the things that have been discussed. We're trying to link the legislative priorities to the lessons we've learned in the crisis. Adaptability, communications as we saw with citizens, preparedness, learning from the mistakes. You know, let's look at 127A-5 and amend decision-making and command and control. We need a truth in giving law. How many fundraisers, events, and concerts have been held for millions and millions of dollars, and yet, as the joke goes in the hotel, ain't seen a dime yet. And there's no truth. We had bills in the past for truth in giving, so that those out there raising money have to think in accounting, and we need to beef up the charitable assets division to provide oversight. Because right now, a lot of people are making a lot of money in a lot of places, but it's not getting to the community. And so this hurts the reputable charities that are out there trying to do work in the money community. Because when people find out and they get burned, they're less likely to give, especially when the time fades. So, you know, and then resiliency matters. Again, individual society levels. And then risk assessment as a cybersecurity guy, that's my whole world. Risk assessment. You know, so you can choose whether to disregard, mitigate, or accept it. And so this is one of the things we want. Next slide, please. And then, of course, as I talked about again, the community connections for you to yourself, and really, KCA is so critical to that. I mean, and I hope that you never go through what we go through, but if that ever becomes having the KCA, having community groups is so important because right now, when you see groups that are divided. And when you're divided as a community, the wolves, as Theo Morrison said, they're outside your doors waiting. And so having the KCA, having the community, having these connections will serve well. I don't think because of what we've learned and what we're doing, I'm hopeful that will never happen, but this is why, to me, the importance of community in this organization and what the strength of neighborhoods really was underscored. So I think that's it, correct? Or maybe oh, and of course me. If you are having any concerns, I'm definitely going to probably cockroach their survey they're doing on great ideas. You know, they say politicians and artists, good ones borrow great ones. And that will be it. So thank you so much, everybody.
Oh, he's fine.
I don't have a presentation.
Yeah, community. It's the primary theme of really what we're here to talk about tonight. And our next speaker, Chief Lindo, is going to start that discussion. And I know from my conversations with him that he was instrumental in creating and beginning a Firewise community on his home island of Molokai. And so I would like him to begin to tell you what he did, how they did it, and what you need to do the same thing. Go.
Good to see you guys. So many times in these meetings, we gather after something tragic has happened, and the community involvement is huge, and it speaks volumes for your association here together as we try to rebuild and move forward and put things in place. And as far as the Firewise community, I wasn't instrumental in putting it together. Organizations like Elizabeth, which is something that you guys should absolutely rally behind and collaborate and be a part of and utilize this resource, because I met her through collaboration on Molokai. So the Molokai Fire Task Force started off maybe, 20-some years ago as a result of a big wildfire there on the island. And some community agency members from the medics, fire, Department of Forestry, Nature Conservancy, they saw the need to put something in place because of all the things that may have gone wrong during that fire, and then a lot of the things that go wrong at every single type of incident. Yeah, and they decided to form this group and collaborate. And what makes Molokai unique, and I'm from Molokai, and I still live there to this day, and I travel back and forth, is it's an island community, much like Kihei, and all of us know each other in some way, shape, or form. So the beautiful thing about Molokai is we see a need, and it should be just like you guys. We see a need, we see a way to collaborate, and we decide to bring people of agencies that matter. So the Molokai Fire Task Force started off with agencies that respond. Yeah, all types of agencies, from Department of Forestry to fire, state highways, public works, fire department, police, everyone who has some type of hand in a cookie jar. And we decided as a community, it's an opportunity for us to collaborate, put plans in place, because there we understand that if an incident was to happen, a storm, a flood, a hurricane, we would probably be the last guys to receive any type of assistance, which is why the community aspect and the community involvement is absolutely foundational. It's absolutely the first place that we should build, because in communities, in neighborhoods, the safety of the community relies on everybody knowing everybody, everyone knowing their children, knowing their streets, knowing what houses, knowing who lives in a certain place, and who knows those areas better than those who live in a community. You know, I might be the operations chief for the Maui Fire Department, but I don't know the communities. I can speak about Molokai, and that's what we were able to do, is grab a hold of things and discuss what does each agency have that we can use, that we can collaborate in the event of different types of emergencies. And where it built from there is it branched out to almost like a Molokai EOC, that we were able to find other avenues on the island, such as the water shortage and issues in that, and collaborate in the same way. And I believe that you guys should do that. So what happened is, back in 2008, I was a fire inspector, much like our fire inspector there in the audience, and I was brought into this group. And a couple years go by, and that's when I met Elizabeth, and she was just starting off to collaborate and build these community wildfire plans. And within the community wildfire plans, it allows communities to build these plans dealing with these type of wildfire incidents, and allows the communities to collaborate, to bridge themselves together, as well as seek funding. So that's the important part about the CWPP. Yeah. And out of that place, one of the communities over there on the west end, who absolutely, there's a huge wildfire, the impact would be phenomenal. They decide and see the value of the collaboration and Firewise, and they reach out, and the connection is made to make these Firewise communities. Why is it good for us and for us to partner with Firewise communities? It's because you as a community decide to take care of your area, creating evacuation zones, making it Firewise safe. That in the event of fire, I understand and know that your community will be well taken care of. Yeah.
And you should be happy to know that the chief has agreed to work with KCA and you to create Firewise communities right here. Now, and of course, we're not going to be able to do this without Elizabeth. You know,
She's probably the main person there.
right? But the fact of the matter is that it's up to you. Okay, it's up to you in your neighborhoods to come together, to work with us, and put these groups together to protect your neighborhoods. And we're going to do that. We're going to start that project as soon as possible. So be ready. If you want to be part of it, be sure to let us know. Right now, the other day we were talking, and the chief came up with an idea that just was great. It was off his head, because I asked him, let's assume that there's a fire in North KCA. Not a surprise. And it's about to jump the highway. And you have all these people that live in South Maui, in South KCA. How are they going to get out? Okay? There's no way for them to get out. So I asked him, what are we going to do? How are we going to fix this? He's a very smart guy. He said, you know what? Let's create some safe zones. I said, what's a safe zone? He said, golf course, hotels, beaches. So tell them about your idea. Come on.
Yeah, and it's not really my idea, because great leaders steal the information, right? So anyway, if you guys ever get a chance, and go to Netflix and watch the fires that happened back in 2018, the Camp Fire, and as I was watching, and the remembrance of what happened in Lahaina came to mind, and you hear the stories, but there was this one situation, and they had plans in place. I mean, California deals with wildfires on a yearly basis with the Santa Ana winds, and in that Netflix show, there was a point where, as people were trying to evacuate evacuate the roads, because everyone was trying to evacuate at the same time. So what happens? Everyone's stuck. You know, I'm sure some of you guys saw footage of Lahaina, and take a look at South Maui. You got the lower road, the upper road, and everything in between. And if everyone's trying to leave, and if you don't take into account that power lines are probably down, trees could have fell down, blocking a lot of those exits. So what happened in a campfire is when I believe there were police officers and firefighters, and everyone was stuck at this one place, and they decided, you know what? This is the best that we can do. Everybody, we're not moving anywhere because everybody's stuck. There's fire on every side. Everybody get out of your vehicles. This is the best area. It was kind of a clear enough area that this is where we're gonna make our stand and stay for the night. And it absolutely worked. Yeah. So, like Elizabeth, like Senator Mackey always said, you know, we should be your last line of defense, the fire department. Your first line of offense should be as soon as you smell smoke and as soon as you know type of emergency, get out. Get out of the area before panic starts to set in. Your contingency plan in the event of you getting stuck and trapped is to identify areas within your neighborhoods, you know, parks, without big trees that could, golf courses, huge parking lots, you know, hotel parking lots. Identify these areas, and of course, on the county side, you know, our county agencies, the USC, the police department. I'm not the expert with evacuation, but the police and NEMA is. But we can all gather together and identify these areas and create these maps, and that's the things that we should work with each community and identify. In the event, this is your contingency plan. Don't worry about driving out of there, it's too late. Grab your things. This will be the first safe area within your neighborhood.
And that's exactly what we're gonna do, okay? Because right now, we don't have any. They're there, but they haven't been mapped. You don't know where they are. So we're gonna work with the fire department, county, and we're gonna figure out how to map this. And we need input from you people as well. You need to tell us if you need a safe place to go and you can't get out, and believe me, there's a good chance you're not gonna be able to get out, okay? I mean, I'm sorry to tell you that, but that's the way it is. We need to figure out where the safe places are. So we need to hear from you as well. But we're gonna start mapping these safe zones and work with the county to put them in place, okay? Thank you.
Yeah, well, one more thing with that. When you identify the safe zones, now you gotta create a habit of remembering. So, in an emergency, the natural human thing to do is to always, you know, we're creatures of habit. And when an emergency happens, we'll always go out the same way we came in. If an emergency was to break out here, we'll naturally come out through the door that we came in. As firefighters, we learn some things, especially when I was a prevention officer, that allows me, when I jump in a plane, I look at what seat I'm on and I grab a frame of reference so I know. If I count and the plane was to flip over, I know I'm 3 rows up and to the left. That's the first exit. It's planting those things. When I go to a hotel, I know I'm on the 3rd floor and I know I'm 5 doors away from the nearest exit. It's making a habit of those things so that way in the event of an emergency, you're not thinking, you know, if I can't get out, contingency plan number 1, get to that first safe area. If that doesn't work, second contingency area all the way down to the beach. And we gotta practice these things, kind of like children, when they do the fire drills, you know, in preschool, they do that every single month. It's required by code, but that's something that the community should decide to practice. Maybe it's quarterly. Maybe it's something that's similar. You know what, we're gonna have our meeting and we're gonna practice what is the area. So you know that from your house, bam, you're gonna get to that area. And I think that would help out.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, you know, we have, I mean, you see signs for tsunami evacuation routes. Yeah, okay. You know, see any signs for fire evacuation routes? No. We need to work on this, people. We need to fix this. Okay. Now, can I have that slide, please? Okay, we're now, Mike Williams is now going to talk about this report that, and this commission that he chaired it started in 2019, and as you can see, the report came out in July of 2021. By the way, it's online. You can get it if you'd like to read it and see it. I think you should. But what you need to know before he tells you about this is the horrible irony of why we did this. This commission was put together because of the terrible fire in Lahaina in 2019. Does that ring any bells with you guys? Huh? They put this together to figure out how they could make sure that it didn't happen again. We both know that that didn't work very well. So Mike, let's just start out. Could you please tell me, what was the purpose of this commission?
Well, first, thanks for having me. The reason that our commission looked into this was because of that disastrous fire in West Maui in 2019 that burned up 25 or 30 homes, and could have been a lot worse, caused by high winds from a hurricane. And so we gathered our, the Cost of Government Commission doesn't have the money to hire experts. We all volunteer labor by the people that are commissioners. And we did the best we could to find all the reports available and recommendations and so forth, and we tried to assemble all the information. We relied a lot on Elizabeth's organization's work that already existed, and we wrote this report, and nothing happened. I mean, 2 years, I never heard a single thing from the county about it, and we've heard all this great planning that Elizabeth's organization's been doing, but how much is that has been implemented so far? I saw an aerial photo of Maui Meadows just tonight. There's no fire break around Maui Meadows. There's no alternate exit out of Maui Meadows. I think that you probably need to be building a big fire break around that, and a fire break all across Kihei Mountain that can be used both for access for the fire equipment to come fight a fire if it's coming down the mountain at you, or as an alternative exit route that can be used in emergencies for just ordinary people to get out of there. And it's not just fires you have to worry about. You may have tsunamis that require emergency exiting. You could have another major Category 5 hurricane come up past the Big Island and head this way, and need to evacuate Kihei for that. So you need to think about that. But I'm here, I can tell you a couple things I suggest on how you can get something done. From my work on affordable housing, working through the council and through Mayor Victorino, what I learned is that if you pressure the council enough, they will hold committee meetings and require the fire chief or his aides or the water department to come in or the public works department to come in and answer questions. Do you have all the legal authority you need right now to control land use for fire breaks and for vegetation management? If you don't, what do you need? We can write the legislation. You have all the money and personnel you need right now to prevent these fires. And if you don't, what is it you need? Tamara Paulton's committee, Disaster Resilience Committee, it's already started having hearings like this, but we need all the relevant committees to be bringing in the administration folks every 4 weeks, every 6 weeks, and say, okay, what more have you done to get ready? And you got to remember the council budget cycle, the county budget cycle, operates on a 1-year budget. So the mayor is already starting to plan to get his budget together that he has to present in March for the fiscal 25 year. Whatever additional plans and monies the council needs to do needs to get together so it can be in next year's budget that starts in March. Then, aside from having the council committees sort of force the administration to come in and answer these questions and bring in experts like Elizabeth and others to explain what needs to happen in the short run. I actually believe that you should also ask the council to fund a request or proposal for a comprehensive fire prevention and mitigation plan for the whole island, not just for South Maui. And I'm not talking about another study. I'm talking about a plan that has a budget and a timeline, and, performance checkpoints where you can see if they've made progress on this or not. It needs. And the county doesn't have the personnel or the right skill sets in-house to write such a plan and develop such a plan. But Elizabeth's organization does, and there may be other organizations that collaborate with hers to do this. But the county needs to fund that, and it needs to fund it probably one short-term version that's going to be ready for next budget cycle in March, and then a longer-term version that's ready for the following year's budget session, in March of 25. And I really think that needs to happen, and the county council can make that happen, and they should. I don't know what it would cost. My guess would be $500,000 to $1 million, but that clearly would be money well spent. But that, from my experience dealing with the council, mostly on affordable housing and homelessness issues, that's what I recommend this organization do, and that everybody in the county does.
All right, Mike, thank you very much. So we've got a selection of questions from the audience, and I'm going to group a couple of them here. One of the principal questions that people are asking, and you can all jump into this one, is what can you do, what can a homeowner do to ensure that his neighbor is doing what's necessary to take care? So it's like how can we get neighborhood good housekeeping? Mic on.
Oh, yeah, here we go. Please start with your own house.
Right.
You can sweep tonight. There's a lot of stuff you can already get going, and you can model what needs to be done. Remember that fire can only travel where there's fuel, and it'll cross the fence, maybe from their side, but you can make your home and yard ignition resistant to the best of your ability. So there's been a lot of focus, and our county fire departments, I don't know if Maui is the same, but I know our other county fire departments are getting an influx of my neighbor, my neighbor. And it's really important that you start around your own house first, because actually the 0 to 5 foot combustible free zone is where a lot of the magic happens in terms of protection. So start there, work your way out, make friends, show how good it looks, do all the things, model the good behavior. The more houses that are like that, the better. But focus on where you have control for your own safety first. And over time, what we have seen is the more neighbors who do that, there's a little bit of the early adopters, and then lots of other folks do it, and then finally people catch up. So it might not be all of your surrounding neighbors, but the more around that are just getting their
well, and this is where the Firewise community comes in. I mean, that's exactly what we're talking about. Is you get your how many what are the minimum number of houses that we need for a community?
I think it's 8.
Okay.
Something like that, but we have all of Waikoloa Village, which has something like 8,000 or 6,000. So you can draw your own boundaries.
Yeah. Now, Chief, you and I talked about this the other day, so this is not a big surprise that we're getting this question. What can be, and Michael as well, what can we do about having legislation enacted to give either the fire department or some agency the authority to go to someone's house, to the neighbor, and say, you need to fix this? Sorry to put you on the spot.
I'm going to pass it over to that guy over there. and in reality, I mean, Nick Tanaka is part of our Fire Prevention Bureau, and the thing when we're dealing with trying to have people cut down, there's a process. Yeah, there's things in place that we gotta follow and do things right, and sometimes it takes longer than it needs to be, but that's the process that's in place. So the only thing that I can tell you guys right now is make the contact to the Fire Prevention Bureau. As far as legislation and all that, it is support the council, support our state senators. I mean, be part of things, and I just don't, this is only my personal opinion. You know, fireworks is one of those things that's prevalent all over the place. We should be part of the solution of getting rid of that. You know, Elizabeth mentioned in the CWPP, and the human factor is probably the biggest thing. Yeah, whether it's campfires, people lighting, you know, driving vehicles in dry areas, fireworks, all of those kind of things. But that's my personal opinion, and it's not one stand that I'm saying on behalf of the fire department. But I mean, you guys see fireworks is kind of out of control. People pop them at every time of the year instead of just at the designated times. Yeah, so.
Just the other day in North KCA,
Yeah.
3 days ago.
Okay, well, the last question is a tough one. I'm gonna give this one to Elizabeth, because it's. This person wants someone to speak to the possibilities and advantages of reforestation.
Better. Our ecosystems are not fire adapted. They don't require fire to regenerate like forests in the American West. Our native ecosystems don't live well with fire. They don't survive fire. But when they are intact and in place, that's one of those shifts of land use that is really, really effective at keeping things safe. And then there's all these other benefits to doing that. You know, when we fire, basically when it comes through, it has changes. It creates changes to the soil. I didn't talk about this because I didn't go into the landscapes portion. But when our fires burn through, it changes the soil. It makes it so that our water that rains down does not penetrate down and get into it doesn't recharge our aquifers the same way. So we start losing water availability and water quality for drinking water. And then we have all of this post-fire erosion that sloughs off that top layer and ends up smothering our coral reefs and impacting fisheries, water quality, sustenance, recreation, tourism, all the things.
And flooding their homes.
Yeah. So the more intact forests we have, all the conservationists would be really excited if we could make that happen, and they might be thinking about environment and conservation and reforestation, but there are everyday benefits to all of us in terms of air quality, water availability, water quantity, nearshore resource health, recreational waters being clean, tourism, etc. It's all connected. So the more reforestation we can do, the better.
Yeah, and I just want to put in a plug for the senators, 2 birds with 1 stone. You know, I mean, we can reforest and create fire breaks, and at the same time attempt to deal with the water situation coming down the mountain. So I mean, there's a lot that we can gain for all of you if we just get started. Okay. Thank you very much.